Greetings, adventurers, and welcome back to Abnormal Voyages. My name is David, and today we find ourselves in St. Augustine, Florida. Now, everyone's heard of Madame Tussauds' famous wax museums, but today we are at the very first wax museum in the entire country, Potter's Wax Museum. This is George Potter. He is the founder of this museum, and he was actually inspired by Madame Tussauds. Back when he was 10 years old, he visited her museum in London, and from then, he was bit with the wax-loving bug and knew that's what he wanted to do. Next to me, this is an example of one of the wax figures. This is made of paraffin wax, and then they're put together with medical-grade prosthetics for the eyes and the teeth, and all of the hair we're going to see is actual human hair. Some of these figures can take up to a year to completely build. I can't wait to see who we're gonna meet, so please tag along with us.
We're going to a place that you've never heard of before. It's Abnormal Voyages. You're gonna learn something new. We're gonna open new doors. It's Abnormal Voyages.
There are several different ways you can choose to explore the Wax Museum. We're going to start by going kind of in chronological order of history, and what better place to start than here with Ponce de Leon and his fellow Spaniards exploring and discovering Florida. Of course, beyond Florida and the New World, there was plenty of history in other places going on, such as the Middle Ages over in Europe. Plenty of knights and crusaders and famous royalty to make wonderful wax figures out of. And if we choose to continue exploring and going further back in time, there are even more important people that have their likeness preserved forever here at the museum. Now, to be fair, we may not know exactly what some of these historical figures looked like when they were alive, but thanks to oil paintings and different reports from back in those days, we're able to get a fairly clear picture of what they may look like in present day. Jumping ahead to something a little more modern, we find ourselves in the days of the Wild West. This is Will Rogers, a very beloved cowboy hero. And not too far away from him, we find Buffalo Bill and Annie Oakley. Beyond just the actual wax figures themselves, and how lifelike the faces are, I really appreciate how much effort they went into to get period-accurate costuming on everyone as well. Here's another big name, hero of the Alamo, Davy Crockett, even wearing his coonskin cap. Another huge name from Texas history, Sam Houston. Though he wasn't at the Alamo, he was at most of the other big fights for Texas independence and ended up becoming the very first president of the country of Texas. Hanging out together, we find Louis Pasteur and Florence Nightingale. And in a similar vein, we have Marie Curie, also hanging out in this same corner, just enjoying a very nice day on the bench. Here's another historical moment, right in the middle of the Civil War, as Abraham Lincoln meets with some of his generals to plan out the next day's battle. Good luck, boys. And if we're talking about great moments in American history, one you definitely can't pass over is the signing of the Declaration of Independence. Everyone's here, the paper's on the desk. All that's left is to pick up the quill and sign your John Hancock.
And as president, I will fight for the rights of wax people everywhere. Beeswax, paraffin wax, all of it is equal, and they will have their rights just like every other American. And to support me, we now view wax figures of all the previous presidents of the United States.
Possibly some of the most famous people in all of history, the presidents get a lot of love here. No matter which side of the political aisle you may find yourself, you're certainly gonna find at least one president you don't mind taking a quick picture with. And then after the presidents, you can skip on over and meet the Queen of England.
Wax is also a great way to immortalize some of our favorite stories and bring them to life. I'm here with my friend Ebenezer Scrooge from A Christmas Carol, written by Charles Dickens. And we are now going to check out a few other famous authors that brought literary works to life.
As a great lover of literature and stories, I'm really glad that they gave these authors their due. It's very cool that they have them grouped around big books here that have little biographies of each one and the names, so you can know exactly who you're looking at, such as Mr. William Shakespeare here. He's just hanging out with Hans Christian Andersen and John Milton. You know, no big deal. They've also got great banners on top that kind of show you the works that these men have done. So here we're going to meet the great minds behind Treasure Island, Oliver Twist, and The Jungle Book. It's hard to imagine a world without stories. So it's fantastic seeing these great minds that some of our favorites all came out of. And speaking of stories, just like Ebenezer Scrooge, you can meet some favorite fictional characters here too, such as Harry Potter, the boy who lived. Next to him is very loyal house elf Dobby, and then he who shall not be named, but we're gonna name him here, Voldemort. Great storytellers aren't the only ones honored. They've actually picked quite a few figures from all different fields, be it art, mathematics, science, and brought them here all together under one roof. So if you've ever wanted to meet a few presidents, a famous painter, celebrated authors, all in one day, it's certainly hard to beat the Potter Wax Museum. And being in Florida, they had to pay tribute to a man who has become a big part of the state's history, Mr. Walt Disney.
Being such an old city, it comes as no surprise that there is certainly a darker side of the history here in St. Augustine. We're going to look at just a few of those moments right now and visit with some of our horror favorites.
The Spanish had a pretty brutal history, including things such as the Spanish Inquisition, where they were quick to take care of anybody who disagreed with them. These two skeletons represent two lovers who ran afoul of a jilted man who, for their indiscretions, boarded them up and chained them to the wall. Nobody found them until decades later. And like any good coastal town, St. Augustine has quite a bloody history filled to the brim with stories of pirates. Going hand in hand with that, we even have a representation of 1740, when a complete siege was laid on St. Augustine, and plenty of buildings were burned to the ground. Florida's also filled with plenty of swamps, so it makes sense that this is the place that you might just run into the creature from the Black Lagoon. And hanging out above him, a little visitor from beyond the stars, the alien queen. Then good old Frankie, hanging out in this chair, looks like he's about to get a little bit of a shock. I definitely appreciate that they added classic movie monsters in here, because honestly, even though they were invented quite a while ago, you still can't beat these characters. Here's Freddy Krueger, downstairs near the furnace. He's got his fingers ready to go. And one of my favorite pieces, this is the sculpted head of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. On one side we have Dr. Jekyll, and then it transforms, turns around, and changes into the sinister Mr. Hyde. Very lifelike. Speaking of heads, there's quite an impressive collection of various parts that are no longer on full body models or are waiting to get their full mannequins. So we have Hitler, Abraham Lincoln, different hands here that would also go to accompany the heads. Very, very interesting. A little morbid, I guess, just to see a bunch of heads laying around, but still pretty cool and a great way to show off people that didn't quite fit into the main gallery right now. We then get a peek at what exactly goes into these fascinating wax models. It's definitely an art form and not something that just anybody can pick up and do. All the shelves and cabinets here are filled with plenty of pieces for the mannequins, anything from fake glass eyes to false teeth. Then here is some of the coloring that they use to get those perfect flesh tones and start layering it right onto the model. The whole thing is a process that takes quite a bit, but here is one that's been sculpted and hasn't yet had anything added to it, so none of the coloring and none of the pieces that would go into a finished product. And eventually, after a lot of work, they'll turn out just like these, filled with life and ready to be slapped up on a mannequin.
And as this workshop proves, even though they may be the oldest, they are not resting on their laurels, and they are actively creating more wax figures to this day. Here is a face in progress here, so every time you visit, you can expect a couple of new friends to have joined the ranks. Well, my name is David, and this has been Abnormal Voyages. That's all the time we have for today, but if you get a chance, make sure you hit that like button down below, subscribe, and comment where you'd like to see us go next. You can also hit our Patreon link down there if you're interested in getting some bonus episodes and receiving a really cool postcard in the mail every single month. Thanks for tagging along. We'll see you down the road.